everybody. It's Thursday, it's Lit Soc, and we're in the middle of Rag Week, so lots of things have been happening, and Treat Week too, so we've got ice creams and lots of food in the quad, as well as events. And this week, Mr. Humphreys is going to lead us off with sport in literature. We've all got some non-fiction about our famous sporting heroes on the table, but also we're going to try and talk about a fictional book as well, aren't we?
Yes, we are. I'm going to start us off, but I'll talk for 10-15 minutes and then open it up to everyone. So I know a lot of you have brought something with you or something to think about. There is a few things on the table, and I think sport and fiction, they don't really go together so much. There's not a multitude of examples. There's not loads and loads.
No.
But there might be more than you might think. And the reason that we decided to talk about it today is that summer's coming. It's a bit of a grey day today, that's why we're back inside. But summer's coming, and of course, when it comes to summer, we all like sports. When you watch TV, the BBC always advertises it's summer of sports. Mm-hmm. Of course, we've got Sports Day coming up. I'm sure you're all thinking about that, aren't you? Yeah? You're starting to get yourselves ready for Sports Day?
The FA Cup final this weekend?
The FA Cup final is this weekend, yes. That's coming up soon. All other things going on this summer, obviously we've got Wimbledon. I think I've got a tennis book on this somewhere. We've got cricket, which I talked about yesterday. We've got the Tour de France. Any cycling fans in the room? No? Okay, well, we've got Tour de France as well.
Tour de France goes past my house.
It goes past your house?
In Yorkshire. I have a house in Yorkshire.
No, that's the Tour de Yorkshire.
Tour de Yorkshire, probably.
No,
Tour de France is in France. That's why it's called Tour de France.
When they did one start. Yeah, they did 1 year where they started.
Yes, they did. They did. That's true.
Yeah,
true.
that's that year then. It did go. The channel.
They cycle across the channel.
If it was every year, you could just, go to your house every year and watch it. You get a ringside seat.
The 1 year it was.
And of course, this year it happens once every 4 years. What's happening this year? Biggest sporting tournament in the world, probably.
Or is it this summer?
It is. It's not this summer. They've moved it to the winter because of the climates.
Yes.
What, the football?
Yes, the Football World Cup happens. It's probably the biggest.
I didn't realise it was this year.
It is this year. Yes.
In Saudi Arabia.
It's in Qatar, so very near Saudi Arabia, and it's for the very first time it's happening outside of the summer because it's just unbearable in the summer. It's like we're talking like over 40 degrees Celsius. You can't play football in that.
There's a lot of controversy about it.
And there's been a lot of controversy about it as well. And that's in November. Now, another reason why we're doing this talk now is, of course, you may remember I did a talk on Walter Tevis a couple of months ago now, probably, wasn't it? And, of course, that had sport involved in it too, albeit maybe not the most active sports. There was chess and there was pool. Mm-hmm. And just to remind you of the quote that I particularly honed in, he said that he had this obsession with the struggle between winning and losing, not just in his sport novels, but also in his other novels as well, his sci-fi novels, and how your struggles in the sporting arena are essentially secondary to overcoming adversity and becoming a better human being away from the field of play, so to speak, first, and then you win at your chosen sport second. The two are sort of linked in that way, but in many ways, it's what happens away from the field that is more important, certainly when it comes to fiction, as I'm going to delve into now. So I'll start with this one. So this is called This Sporting Life, and it's by David Storey. Now, he actually won the Booker Prize, I don't know if you know this, with Savile in the 1970s, but this is probably his best-known work. It was made into a film starring Richard Harris.
Richard Harris in his young days before Dumbledore.
Yeah, before he became Dumbledore, or the first Dumbledore,
You
as a
mentioned
very
it
old
first.
man.
Yeah, I did. Quite often I mention it first. It's a point of connection with you all, is it not? Well,
We may as well mention it now because we know that other people are going to talk about it later,
Yeah.
so we may as well get it out of the way.
Yeah.
It's going to happen. So this is from the kitchen sink era of dramas. Now, what the kitchen sink refers to is sort of like late 1950s, early 1960s time. It's where it was a big focus on the everyday struggles of working class people, because they weren't perhaps represented very much in fiction, the underclass, so to speak, and their everyday struggles. And there's a big emphasis on social realism, and it can be very hard-hitting. Now, I say people, but it's predominantly men, really. Angry, they call them angry young men who are very disaffected and downtrodden. And like all good disaffected and downtrodden people do, they rail against the system. Perhaps one notable difference, obviously there's social justice, wokeness, all these terms that have been bandied around at the moment that we're all familiar with and that we're all going through. There's big encouragement for solidarity between different marginalised groups. That's not something that the angry young men really were all about, because they certainly weren't concerned with feminist concerns, for instance.
They weren't, no.
They were very much focusing on, angry young male concerns. Now, the main character of this, his name's Arthur, and he very much fits this angry young man mould. So he's very poor. He's a coal miner's son, a struggling coal miner's son, and he lives in the north of England. I don't think the town is actually named. Now, have you all heard of the North-South divide? Can you tell me what the North-South... What do they understand by the term the North-South divide? What does that mean to you? It might not mean much. But what does it mean? Just be interested to see what you think the North-South divide is, Lulu.
It's kind of I would say a bit more than a rivalry, but like and kind of or sometimes a distrust between people who live in like the south of England and people who live in the north.
Yeah, certainly. I think it is fair to say there is a bit of a rivalry of sorts. Mm-hmm. But so yes, it is geographical, but it's also socio-economic. And traditionally, all of the wealth is in the south, and all of the poverty is in the north. There's that saying, it's growing up north, and your opportunities, your prospects, and your overall quality of life is just generally not as good in the north as they are in the south. And that probably is still true today. Actually, they've got the red wall, as they call it. Mm. Now, Arthur, he's struggling in this environment, but he happens to be spotted. He gets in a bar fight one night, and he gets spotted by the coach of the local rugby league team, who offers him a trial. And it turns out he's actually quite good at it, at rugby, and suddenly his fortunes change as a result. And he gets to buy a new car, he gets to buy fancy suits, and he wants to impress his recently widowed landlady, Mrs. Hammond.
This is before rugby league was professional when Daley Story wrote this,
yes.
And rugby union was amateur.
Yeah.
So there's a big class element, and rugby league was really popular up north, wasn't it? And rugby
still
union,
is. It still is more popular up north. Yeah.
Rugby union down south.
Mm-hmm.
Now rugby union is professional too, but in those days, the sport changed his life, doesn't it?
Yeah. Absolutely. So he gets more successful, but things don't go so well. Just because he's getting more material wealth, it doesn't mean that his life's getting better, and he doesn't really manage to impress. You can't understand why he's not impressing Mrs. Hammond. He fails in his quest. So basically, it's sort of like it's a deconstruction of masculinity, a traditional masculinity. Both because of rugby, when you think of it, it's quite a brutal physical game. Lots of big collisions, and also using his status to woo doesn't work out. And again, it's like looking at the traditional role of the man as the one who does that. The man is the provider. The man is the actor. The woman is like the passive person who is just the object almost. So now on the pitch, he's very dirty and aggressive, and he punches and elbows players, and he becomes known as sort of like the enforcer as a result. And I'll just read you a bit. This is from his first game. And 15 minutes of the first half passed, I'd never even touched the ball. I was aching with activity and blowing hard. It took me most of the first half to realise I was being starved off the ball by my own team. It was the hooker, Taff Gower, Welsh, who was organising it, I decided. A quiet little frog working out his last days in the game with the A team. With his scarred, toothless face, his short, bow-legged figure stumped alongside me in each movement and casually diverted the ball whenever it came my way. I gathered he mustn't like me. I might be keeping one of his mates out of the team, stopping a wage. I didn't worry about this. I just saw an early end to my ambitions. As we folded down for the next scrum, his face was further forward than mine. "Why are you keeping the ball from me?" I asked him. His head was upside down, waiting for the ball to come in, but he was grinning fairly politely. I could see the back of his throat. When he spat, I couldn't move my head. I didn't think he could like me. I waited 3 scrums to make him feel relaxed and also to get the best opportunity. I kept my right arm loose. His face was upside down, his eyes straining loose in his sockets to catch a glimpse of the ball as it came in. I watched it leave the scrum half's hands and his head buckled under the forward's heaving. I swung my right fist into the middle of his face. He cried out loud. I hit him again and saw the red pulp of his nose and lips as my hand came away. He was crying out really loud now, partly affected professional pain, but most of it real. His language echoed all over the ground. The scrum broke up with the ref blowing his nut off on the whistle. I saw that, he shouted, urged on to violent mimes of justice by the crowd's tremendous booing. They were all on their feet, demonstrating and screaming. Gower had covered his face with his hands, but blood seeped between his fingers as the trainer and 2 players directed his blind steps off the field. You'll be nailed good for this, you dirty little swine. You'll never play again, and all that, the ref was shouting. He pointed with real drama at the opposing hooker. The crowd's response reached a crescendo, far more than it would provide for, say, the burning of a church. So he's got away with it, and the opposition person has been blamed. So he's actually very cunning there, because that he's ingratiating himself with the team, but also he's cheating, and you got the opposition in trouble. So he's doing well on the pitch, but like I said, his brutal, underhanded approach. He gets his reputation very early on, and so it means things don't go so well for him off the pitch. And what he does on the pitch ends up defining him as a person off the pitch, and no one likes him basically, and everybody he comes across doesn't trust him, and he is just written off as being this crude, violent man as a result. So just ask yourself: is that some? Think about how you think of some sports people today. Do we think of some of our more famous sports people today like that as well? Right, okay, next one I want to talk about quickly is Keeper by Mal Peets. Now, this is something of a YA classic. It was his debut novel, and the reason he wrote it, he said that football novels, such as they were, I don't know if you're familiar with Tom Palmer novels, for instance, he said they were rubbish, and he just wanted to rectify that because he was a big football fan, but he wanted to get a good football book. Now, the tagline of this one is, it says, "The haunted by the spirit of the game." Now, this has got a bit of a double meaning to it. The central character of this is called El Gato, or the Cat, and he's a Brazilian goalkeeper, and he's small matter of having won the World Cup to his name, and he's literally haunted by a spirit known as the Keeper, an enigmatic spirit who helps him become a really, really great goalkeeper. But there's also, they talk about cheating in his sporting life, there's also a sense that he's haunted by the spirits of the game, in the sense of it being, playing by the rules, playing fair, being decent. And he perhaps there's some dark secrets there that El Gato hasn't always upheld the principles of fair play and decency, just like Arthur didn't in his sporting life. Also, like Arthur, El Gato has sort of emerged. He's had humble origins, but unlike Arthur, he won a World Cup, so he's got some success. And the way that it's structured is, it says on the back here, a Paul Faustino novel, and there's a couple of others. Now, he's a journalist, and it's kind of almost as much about him as it is about the Keeper. So the journalist, he's very driven, he's very ambitious, he's obsessed with money, he's obsessed with making a name himself in the world of news reporting. And so again, it's sort of like about the compromises that you make with your moral integrity for the sake of just being really successful at sports. But the Keeper is if there is a moral pulse, it's the Keeper, and he kind of represents the ideal form of what a footballer should aspire to be. How good a footballer could be, but you realistically can't. Okay, so yeah, that's a good one, Mal Peet Keeper. And the last one I want to talk about, this is a recent one, and it's called The Passing Playbook. And it's a very recent edition by someone called Isaac Fitzsimmons. Now, in the way that the tagline there had a double meaning, the passing playbook here also has a double meaning, because passing, yes, football, that passing is part of the game of football, but passing is a term that's used in LGBT circles as well. Does anyone know in what sense passing is used?
So either pass as straight, but mostly pass as the gender that you identify as, that might be separate from what you're assigned there.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So the main character is Spencer, and he's gone to a new school, got a spot on the boys' football team, but no one knows that actually he's a trans boy. He's passing. But, so passing means that, you're covering it up, you're doing all you can so people don't suspect that you might be transgender, and people think you're just cisgender, so to speak, okay? So as well as being a sports one, this is also one of the LGBT books, and of course there's been lots of LGBT books arriving on the publication scene, as we talked about not too long ago in the Lit Soc. So he's a talented footballer, and this is set in America, by the way, so instead of football it's called soccer, rather annoyingly. And he's fast-tracked into the boys' first team, but once again, as the more success he has on the pitch, the more troubles he comes across off it. So things come to a head when his coach is actually very supportive of him in general. His coach basically has to bench him, has to put him out of the team because of a discriminatory law that forbids him from playing. So he either has to keep quiet, but if he wants to play on the team, then he has to reveal the truth to all his teammates. Now, also, he has actually sort of fallen for someone who's on the team as well, someone called Justice, interestingly enough, is the name of the person he's fallen for. So, it's got a nice romantic element to this as well. So, come-of-age romantic story. But much like Heartstopper, which I hope someone has twigged is something that we can talk about today around the table, and I'd be very disappointed if not, it kind of has various complications as well, because obviously it's got the locker room mentality, and what's going to happen if the truth gets out, what it's going to mean for the team dynamic and everything. So yeah, it's another one about how sport can be used to express your identity away from the field of play, but how the person you want, the decisions you make off it can define your ability on the sport and how well you do on the pitch too. Okay, so yeah, The Passing Playbook by Isaac Fitzsimmons. So there you go. So there's a few sports and fiction examples. So who has brought something with them? I think you two have.
Maybe.
Perhaps. Are you two going to talk together about this, or
We've got different ones.
you're different? Okay, right, Evie, you can start us off then, and we'll do musical
I'm just
chairs.
going to go and get mine. I've thought of something else. I've just realised. I'm just
Okay.
going to move this. All this
Okay, Karen.
So I have bought, well, it's on the table, but it's at home. I just couldn't find it. So I've got Quidditch Through the Ages. It's like a very side thing to Harry Potter. And what I really find fun about this book, it's written as if it was a book published in the Wizarding world. So it's got like Quidditch Through the Ages by Kenilworthy West, but obviously it's by J.K. Rowling. And it's got very good. It's got a Hogwarts library thing. You can see, we've got Ron, Neville, Hermione. Hermione took it out twice actually. It's got lots of little cool scribbles on it from the Hogwarts students. It's also got some very nice fake reviews. So we've got Mathilda Bagshot, Gilderoy Lockhart, who is obviously from a little infamous author from Chamber of Secrets. But this is basically explaining Quidditch. So everyone knows Quidditch from Harry Potter. It's like it's a whole mix of sports, but on a broomstick, and it kind of starts off saying very early things, and it's got some very nice medieval looking pictures of Quidditch back in the day. So, and it shows how all the different parts of Quidditch were brought in. So, for example, the Quidditch hoops actually used to be baskets, but the baskets were outlawed because there wasn't a standard size for baskets. So one team would have very small baskets and the other team would have very big baskets, so that wouldn't exactly be fair. And also how there would be a bird called the Snidget, the golden snitch, which is what the golden snitch came from. So there'd be Snidget hunting, which would be like basically if you got the Snidget, you'd get like a bag of gold or something. And what happened? And one of a player, a guy, Barbarous Bragg, brought a caged Snidget to a match, and told the assembled players he would award 150 galleons, the equivalent to over 1 million galleons today, to the player who caught the Snidget. So it's very similar to the golden snitch, but as I'm sure, it's a bird, so it would fly out of the arena, and also fact was that what would happen is, because obviously the bird would end up being killed, that the Snidgets were kind of dying out. So that's how the invention of the golden snitch came, as substitution for the game, and also so they can actually control where the golden snitch goes, so it doesn't go outside, and also so to keep the Snidget population. And there are lots of things I find really fun in this book. It acts as if it is it's basically a handy book for Quidditch. So if this were the Wizarding world, and I'm sure we'd all love to play Quidditch at some point, depending if you want to be one that gets hit or not by a bludger, because that doesn't sound good. But I suppose this would be, in the Wizarding world, kind of something that all the Quidditch players would have, and diagram from the noble sport of warlocks. So it's very rudimentary Quidditch pitch. You can see it's got the little baskets. That is pretty much what is there in the film, and it's got all the teams, all the Quidditch teams. So we've got they do vary. So we've got the Chudley Cannons, which Ron Weasley supports, and the motto is "Let's just keep our fingers crossed and hope for the best." Whereas the Falmouth Falcons are "Let us win, and if we cannot win, let us break a few heads." So you can see the difference between all the different kinds. We've got Puddlemere United, which Albus Dumbledore supports, I believe. And so they're all in the British and Irish Quidditch League. So we've got all the different Quidditch teams. It's very interesting, and it's also got things from different countries as well, which is rather fun because it's got all sorts of things. I'll read a bit from South America because I find that quite funny. Quidditch is played throughout South America, though the game must compete with the popular quad pod here as in Northern Argentina and Brazil both reached the quarterfinals of the World Cup in the last century. Undoubtedly, the most skilled Quidditch nation in South America is Peru, which tipped to become the first Latin World Cup winner within 10 years. Peruvian warlocks are believed to have their first exposure to Quidditch from European wizards who were sent by the International Confederation to monitor the number of viper-tooths, Peru's native dragon. Quidditch has become a very venerable obsession of the wizard community since that time, and the most famous team, the Tarbato Tree Skimmers, recently toured Europe to great acclaim. And it's so detailed, and you really think that if you were to play Quidditch, it would be amazing. I mean, it's got development of the broom, it's got the effect of a cushioning charm, which I suppose you would need in Quidditch. The brooms don't look the most comfortable. I just love the fact that it really feels like something that pretty much like if you were a Quidditch household, and I mean, for example, like if there was like household in like here who really enjoyed football, they maybe have like a handy book of like all the teams and the rules. This is basically the Quidditch equivalent of it.
It's a handbook, isn't it?
Yeah, pretty much.
Has anyone actually played a variation of Quidditch?
I do not know. I think people have attempted it, but on the ground.
I saw a woman on the train who was wearing a Quidditch. She looked like she was going to play it, and she had like her
I love the
team's
Quidditch outfits.
I've seen videos, and like the snitch I saw was someone dressed as yellow running around. like they run around outside.
Yeah.
The snitch would go around the streets, and there'll be two
It's
people
so weird.
running on broomsticks, like outside on the streets.
I want you to imagine sitting on a broomstick. There's no saddle.
That's uncomfy.
Can you imagine playing a game on a broomstick?
Ow.
Ow.
Yeah.
Splinters.
That's why they had the cushioning charm.
Yeah.
I think I will probably just end with a bit of Albus Dumbledore's forward, because I think that's rather funny. I would be deceiving my readers if I said that this explanation made Madam Prince happy, handing over a library book to Muggles. She suggested several alternatives, such as telling the people from Comic Relief, this is a special edition for Comic Relief, that the library has burnt down, or simply pretending that I dropped dead without leaving instructions. When I told her that on the whole I'd preferred my original plan, she reluctantly agreed to hand over the book, though at the point when it came to let go of her, her nerve failed her, and I was forced to prise her fingers individually from the spine. Although I have removed the usual library book spells from this volume, I cannot promise that every trace is gone. Madam Prince has been known to have unusual jinxes to the books in her care. I myself have doodled absent-mindedly on a copy of Theories of Transsubtle Transfiguration last year, and next minute found the book beating me viciously round the head. Please be careful how you treat this book. Do not rip out the pages, do not drop it in the bath. I cannot promise you Madam Prince will swoop down on you wherever you are and demand a heavy fine. All that remains is to thank for supporting combat relief and to beg muggles not to try Quidditch at home. It is, of course, an entirely fictional sport and no one really plays it. May I also take this opportunity to wish Puddlemere United the best of luck next season. Albus Dumbledore. That is...
People do play it though. We just
Yeah, I mean-
established.
She didn't think of this.
They actually do. Like I saw like you could sign up for actual teams. I think it was in
I haven't looked
No, they
at
do
Quidditch.
They do.
I
They
was
play
being
it
serious
just
about
on
them
the
not checking.
ground. Play it just on the ground because I think if you had a jet detector or a broomstick. But
Yeah, I saw. So they run around it's like normal Quidditch but on the floor. But they do have broomsticks, and all they have like the outfits and everything.
So yeah,
Anyway, thank you,
that
Dee.
is Quidditch through the ages.
Thank you very much. Emily, did you have something as well separate? Do you want to go next? I thought you two were together. I was talking about it earlier, but
They
you...
have Quidditch UK.
Oh, running. There we go.
And you can like put in your postcode and find your team.
Oh,
Got
Wow.
that. Okay.
You gonna join up?
Actually, is there a video on there of it in action? I might see if I can find it.
you might be able to do like fantasy football where you create your own
Yeah.
team.
Yeah. Anyway,
Out of all the best players.
sorry, Emily.
Go on, Emily.
Well, I've got Running for Gold, and I read this like last year. It's about this guy called Danny, and he's like the best runner in his school, and he's very good at running. And his dream is to go to the Olympics, and London Olympics are coming. And he really wants to beat Usain Bolt, like it's his dream. But his mum also wants him to like study and stay in school and like be like really good academically as well. So he has to try and find a balance between like his academic life and like doing his running. He does like every morning, and his mum tries to make him take a break, but like throughout the book he does go secretly behind his mum's back to go training to be able to go to the London Olympics. And lots of things do happen. Like at one point he injures himself, and there are the trials and everything. Some nights it also shows like some nights where his friends ask him to go out and stuff, and he says he can't go because he has to go running. Like he's running every night, every day, every morning. And so this was why like his mum wants him to. She's like, if you don't win, then you've got to stay in school. You don't have another option. But he really believes he can do it. But then he does meet like a hurdle, because you always meet hurdles. He injures himself, and when he injures himself, he says that Danny had always thought that there could be nothing better in the world than being an athlete. Now he had arrived at a different conclusion. There was nothing worse in the world than being an injured athlete. But he injures himself like 3 weeks before the Olympics. So he now thinks that everything's going to go badly and he can't do it, and his dreams have gone away. But they find a hospital, like they go to Sweden, and they try and like get him do this like weird physio thing that make him get better. And then if you read it, you get to see if he actually beats Usain Bolt and goes to Olympics. But like I find it really inspiring. Like it shows that you can do both, like academic and school, and try to keep going no matter like what happens, and you can't try to give up because there are lots of people telling him it's insane that you want to beat Usain Bolt because he's so fast, you're never going to beat him. But he also dreams of being the fastest man. He thinks he can do it, so he trains every day for it.
There's a very famous sporting film called Chariots of Fire. Ever heard of that? Well, they took ordinary actors. They were all young men. And I was listening to a programme about it just before the Oscars. And they weren't particularly fit. They were, young, sort of okay. Anyway, they trained them into Olympic athletes before this film. They were running, a couple of the actors were saying, they were running, not as fast as Usain Bolt, but they were running 100 metres in 10 seconds, which is Olympic fast. That's how good the training was before this film. But the whole irony of this, it's a wonderful film, I do recommend it if you ever get a chance to see it, is that when they show the running, there's only a very brief moment where it's in proper speed. Most of it is in slow motion, so you never get the idea really that they're running at these amazing speeds. So it was really interesting to hear this, that they trained so well. And one of the actors, Nigel Havers, had to be trained to hurdle. He'd never done hurdling at school. He was trained in that period, so sort of 3 months before the film started, and he became a champion hurdler.
Seems like a shame. Seems like a waste. They did all that training. And
Well, yeah.
I think it's a waste.
well, yeah. Well,
So
it depends how you look at
How
it.
you coach, isn't it, and whether you're determined enough.
Yeah, and I've also got this book that came out very recently, by Lindsey Vonn, called Rise and My Story, and I really want to read it, and I think I would really recommend to read it because I think it's going to be very good because it's Lindsey Vonn, like one of the best female downhill skiers, and she's had lots of like as well. She's like broken lots of things before and like been to hospital so many times, but she's still been able to go skiing and like be that fast. It's insane. It's incredible. And she wrote her autobiography, which would be really nice to read.
That'd be good.
Okay,
Especially for you.
Yes,
Well, on
absolutely.
your way to being a champion skier.
Yes, sports and biographies. And of course, we have someone that's heavily like Tom Daley and
Yeah.
well. So yes, one biographies as well. Pretty good. Thank you, Emily.
Thank you, Emily. Who's next?
Eleanor, do you want to go next?
So I was a little bit stuck on what to choose because I'm not much of a sport fiction person. But I have read the graphic novels of Fence, and the only copy I actually have physically is Fence Disarmed, which I slightly regret buying because it's not really my cup of tea. It's basically like a cringy version of the graphic novels, and the graphic novels are great. It really, it really made me open up my eyes about fencing, and I do think fencing is really cool. Miraculous Ladybug sort of put it in my heart, and so that's really good, but I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of this book, but I'll recommend it anyway, because some people might like it. I'll read the back. Elite teams, foreign fencers, scandalous liaisons. The boys of King Row are off to an exclusive world-class training camp in France. Surrounded by impressive scenery and even more impressive international fencers, talented underdog Nicholas can't help feeling out of place. Today, he and his teammates must find it within themselves to face foreign rivals, complicated ex-boyfriends, threats of expulsion, and even the infamous Jesse Coste, Nicholas's golden boy secret half-brother. So, so I'm kind of glad you mentioned Heartstopper though, because I wanted to speak about it, but I don't. I speak about it a lot, so I thought.
I'm sure someone else can. But why don't you say something about Heartstopper?
Okay. Well, in the first book, it is really built on rugby, and the whole relationship of Nick and Charlie is based off of rugby because that's how they started interacting more, and it really talks about the stereotype of rugby players, and there's this one and it's massively surrounded by rugby, in especially the TV show, and I don't know if it's in the book, but there's this one thing that Charlie says in the series, as like it's hard to be confident when everyone views you as a stereotypical gay boy, and I think it really sort of Heartstopper's good at breaking down the stereotypes, or not just breaking it down, but showing how ruthless it actually can be in real life, because a lot of books fantasize, how hard life can be sometimes, especially in high school and at an all-boys school, and I think it really shows that in Heartstopper, and I think rugby's given a good light, because I'm not a big rugby fan, but it certainly comes across positively in Heartstopper, so yeah, that's all I'm going to say.
And it's rugby union in Heartstopper as well. Anyone else want to say anything about Heartstopper, seeing as Alan just talked about it? Go on, you all... you're seeing it or read it.
It
You
slaps.
You next.
Me?
Yeah, you.
I
Thank you.
saw this video. At the end of the video, it said that it's true love when they convince you to play rugby. You showed me that.
Well, yeah, because he's primarily a runner, isn't he? And yes, rugby is not traditionally sort of being skinny and fast, but he finds a place on a team, and he does well.
Yay.
Anyway, Lily, sorry.
That's okay. Okay. The book I want to talk about is actually non-fiction, but it's called Clearing Boundaries: The Rise of Australian Women's Cricket. I don't know if I've spoken about this before, but stop me if I have. So my family got sent a copy of this book. It's massive. It's like this big and this wide. But the reason we got sent a copy of it was because of this picture, which is on the back of it. And my grandmother is in this picture. She's at the back here.
Okay.
And that's because in the 1940s, she played cricket for Australia. And she went over to England to play against England. And I actually have footage of that I'll show in a minute. But she's a very special lady. She's called Lorna Beale.
Ah.
So yeah, samesies. But yeah, that's her on the boat. I'm pretty sure it's back to Australia because in the background, you can see these men who are wearing fezzes, and we think that means they were in the Suez Canal, and that's where they met. My grandma met my granddad on the boat on the way back to Australia because my granddad was English and he was working in the Australian Navy. So yeah, love story. It's cute. Anyway, yeah, that's. This is from PowerPoint 2 days ago, but that's my grandparents. Yeah, both sadly gone, but very much loved. But yeah, so my grandma played cricket for Australia. She was a wicket keeper, which is where you stand at the back and catch the balls. I'm rubbish at cricket, so but I always play wicket to remember her. And there's like heaps of stories about grandma. She was a very humble woman, and she used to like go in the street and play against the local dads, and they would be all like tough and like, oh, this is not a woman's game, and then she would like actually smash out the park. So yeah, she was a great cricketer. But yeah, this is more pictures of her. But yeah, so that book has that picture that I showed you on the back cover, which is very special. But yeah, I can show you footage of her playing if you guys want.
Yes.
Didn't know how to show this to everyone at once. There's some very sexist commentary over the top of it. But
Mr.
yeah.
Allen's has done quite a unit on sports commentary on women's games for year 13. How sexist it is.
I'll manoeuvre it so everyone can see.
It's all right. As long as we can hear it.
Australian captain Molly Dive leads her team onto the Sydney Cricket Ground for the final test against England. Visiting opener McLaglen has a life as she's dropped in slips by Craddock. Australia's one test up and England must win this to retain the Ashes. They play seriously and well. This one's gone straight through to the fence. Wilkinson hits one and hard. It's just as well Bradman has retired. These girls may be ladies, but they're certainly fast between wickets. A typical Bradman hook. There's no body line in this series. Bill O'Reilly chats with English captain Molly Hunt. Big hit, and just as well she missed. That would have quietened the Barricas. Miss Duggan, dug out. She's bowled by Craddock for 2. England makes 100 bowls to low. She snicks it, and Schmidt takes a brilliant catch. It was no fluke either.
Looks like there's really a huge crowd there as well. Which is really
Under Saunders.
fabulous.
Another snick and another catch. That's smart work, even if girls do get a lot of practice in slips. And of course, with them catching a man's instinct.
So mean.
This is a woman's world, but it looks as if the girls don't trust each other.
Funny.
Male umpire.
Yeah, so that's cool.
What year was that?
1949. So yeah, the book is all about the how Australian women's cricket like changed over time, and it's got a bit about grandma in it, including her maiden name on the like scoreboards, which is cool.
And the weird thing I just thought of was, so I live in Ishin, and we realised that when Grandma came over to England to play cricket, she stayed in a house like a 5-minute walk away from where I live now, which is insane coincidence because my parents moved over from Australia to live here. So yeah.
Serendipity indeed, yeah.
Miss Ria?
Brilliant.
Sure.
I also wasn't 100% sure what to choose because, like you said, it's a tricky thing to find. But I remembered this one that was on the Carnegie shortlist. Was it 2019?
Yes.
It's
I believe so.
Rebound by Kwame Alexander, and this is a prequel to a book called Crossover that he brought out that just went huge in America, I think. I was watching some footage in an interview from him earlier, and he was saying in some schools in America the librarians had to like lock the books in the cupboard because all the boys were stealing copies of the book because it was so popular.
Big success.
Yeah, and he went to one of those schools and brought copies of the book and gave it out for free, and they were all like, he said it was like there was gold between the pages. It was just so cool because he said all the boys were so happy to have a book about basketball because they'd never really read anything like that before. But it's also all written in verse, and he kind of bases it a lot on like rhythm and rhyme and all kind of stuff like that. So
It works quite well for basketball.
yeah, and it fits really well, and it's just really cool read. Like there's some sections that look like a graphic novel, but it's basically about this boy in the 80s who is in mourning, and he gets shipped off to live in a new town with his grandparents, and is kind of struggling with dealing with that, and then he finds basketball. And this is the character that is the dad in the other book, who at the point in the other book is like a world-renowned basketball player, so this is kind of his story. It's not something I would ever have thought to pick up for myself.
No, if we didn't make the Carnegie.
No, I would have thought that not for me, but you know that's not the right thinking, I don't think, but it's easy to do. But so I read it for that, and I was like, oh, this is so good.
I think it's got the title also a double meaning, Rebound, because it's about his personal struggle and he rebounds from adversity to the other side. So.
But yeah, it's great. I'll read the first page for you because it kind of details what I was saying about it being like a rhythm. May 28th, 1988. The game is on at the park. The stars are out. It's close to dark. Hoop kings soaring in the sky, so high, so fly, like they've got wings. It's like the backtop in the box spring. Hey Charlie, you see what he did with that thing? My best friend Skinny yells, twirling and whirling the ball.
Like a rap kind of
yeah, kind of. Yeah. It's kind of, a lot of it is like that. Like it's kind of a lot of movement in the words, and it's all different types of things. There's some haikus, there's some like rhythm poetry, there's some free verse. So yeah, it's really cool. Yeah, I recommend that one. And if you ever get a chance to watch any of his like TED Talks or anything, Kwame Alexander, he's hilarious. I was watching some of them earlier, and he's a really good speaker. He's just really good fun. So yeah, that's my one.
Thank you, Miss Ria.
It's all right. Who wants to go next?
Right, I'm not sure who else has brought something. I picked all the people I know who brought something. Who has got something? Who hasn't spoken yet?
No.
No, Dea? Sienna?
Not this week. My
No?
turn then, I guess.
Yes,
Sure.
over to you, Miss Huntley. Thank you, Miss Ria.
That's all right.
Basketball is fun. I did it for, I chose it just because. Last year.
Last year?
Yeah.
Where did you do it? Where did you do it, Sienna?
In school.
In the gym?
PE, we did it at Oaken Lane.
Oh, Oaken Lane, right,
Yeah,
okay.
they have a basketball court.
Oh.
It's like in the corner.
Were you in the group when I broke Ellen's glasses?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
I threw a ball at her face. But then she threw a ball accidentally, and then the next week she threw a ball at mine, so it was fine.
Oh, well.
All's well that ends well.
All's well that ends well.
Except her glasses.
Well, I was originally going to talk about this that I read a long time ago called The Art of Fielding. It's all about basketball, baseball. And I do like a good baseball film. Field of Dreams. If you've never seen Field of Dreams, it's fabulous. And this is a sort of college story. And it's also got a connection to Moby Dick, the great American novel. And it is really good. And it's really well written, and I'm not a great reader of sports stories, but I really enjoyed this one. But while Mr. Humphreys was talking about the playbook, the soccer, I suddenly remembered what I'd read a couple of years ago, which is, we don't have it in the library, and I've given my copy away, but this is one of the funniest books I've ever read, and it's about football. Now, I'm a real fan of an author called J.L. Carr. Now, J.L. Carr was one of his biographer wrote at his funeral. He'd compartmentalised his life so much. He'd done so many different things. He'd been a headmaster, he'd been a publisher, he'd been a journalist. He seems to have played for a football team at some point. That when at the funeral, it was really loads and loads of people, and everybody turned up to mourn a different man. 80 types of... and he wrote a book called A Month in the Country, which... started the film careers really of Kenneth Branagh and Colin Firth. It's all set in Yorkshire. If you like them, it's a fabulous novel as well, set after the First World War. They're both suffering trauma, and this is his football novel. And it's about how the FA Cup, and this is the myth about the FA Cup, isn't it? That you can go from zero to FA Cup champions, and that's the joy of this competition. Because you don't have to be in a particular league. Everybody takes part in it and then makes its way through. So the reason they do well is because there's a sort of massive combination of serendipity. They're in the middle of the Fens. The Fens are in the Midlands, but they're also to the east of England. So we're sort of in Lincoln, Northamptonshire. That's where J.L. Carr moved the country after living in London. And they get to where they're going. They're useless. They're a totally, utterly hopeless team. But somehow or other, they acquire this manager who's Hungarian. He's an immigrant. He's got no idea about football at all. He's an academic. But he goes to watch a Leicester game, and he learns the art of football just by watching this one game. His name is Dr. Kuseth. And it's... in their new... This is from the Penguin website. In their new all-buttercup yellow stripe, Steeple Cinderby Wanderers, who usually feel lucky when their pitch is above water level, are England's most obscure team. This is the story of how they start the season by ravaging the Fenland League and end it by going all the way to Wembley. Told through unreliable recollection, florid local newspaper coverage. Now that's a parody of Neville Cardus. Neville Cardus was a journalist for the Guardian, and he wrote the most amazing cricket commentary. So J.L. Carr is taking him off. Bizarre committee minutes. This is how the team is brought together. Entertaining and moving. There will never be players again like Alex Slingsby, Sid the Shooting Star Swift, and the immortal milkman turned goalkeeper Monkey Tonks. And J.L. Carr wrote about it. But is this story believable? It all depends on whether you want to believe it. So it's the sort of hope of the ne'er-do-wells, a bit like when Elton John bought Watford. And turned it into because of the amount of money he could spend on it, into a fabulously Premier League team.
Relegated, by the way.
And DJ Taylor, after J.L. Carr died, he wrote it's a mixture of the prosaically down-to-earth and unutterably fantastic. On the one hand, it's grounding in the realities of amateur football, where the teams change into their kit in an old Ellen railway carriage, and the reek of embrocation steals along the touchline at River Fog. It's horribly authentic. Things aren't quite as bad now, but they certainly were in the 70s. On On the other, its premise comes straight from a post-war boys' comic such as Victor or Eagle, nothing less than a straightforward exercise in wish fulfillment, in which a village size, trained up by Dr. Kuseth, an émigré Hungarian academic, who has applied his deductive intelligence to the first principles of sport, and supported by the tyrannical local magnate Mr. Fangfoss, sees off several First Division teams in a triumphal cavalcade that runs all the way to Wembley Stadium. It's almost indescribable, because it's I was reading it thinking, I can't quite believe what I'm reading here, and I knew J.L. Carr's work really well, and there were just moments when it was so funny, and it's so elliptically told. In other words, you're not quite sure what you're reading, but it is fabulous. This is Steeple Cinderby's description of the village. Population 547, height above level in the dry season 32 feet. The fens are normally very wet. And then they're bigged up by this journalist who's a woman, and Mr. Fangfoss, his name comes from a village in Yorkshire. So there's lots of things going on here that Carr is doing. And one of the things that came out when J.L. Carr died, he was a headmaster of primary school in Northamptonshire, and one of the things he used to do was in the middle of a new housing estate, and they'd planted all these blossom trees. So when the blossom was out, he used to take the whole school out. They'd have a whole sort of morning trotting round the housing estate, looking at the blossom and reciting A. Houseman, lovely of the trees, the cherries now. Now, any headmaster that does that has got my vote, basically. I think you'd really enjoy it, because it's football, but it's football sort of as, we're at the bottom, we're not going anywhere.
Sounds a bit wacky to me.
It's completely wacky, but it also makes perfect sense. It's because the other thing DJ Taylor says is it's a comic masterpiece, but it's also a state of the nation without actually showing it. A piece of England that is completely forgotten for a lot of the time, and politics never changes. So it's really worth pursuing. Reminds me actually of Barrow, Mike following Barrow.
Yes, well, I think maybe someone to recommend to Mr. Gibbons. Yes, yeah, for sure.
So
there we go. Okay, well, thank you everyone.
Thank you everyone for your contributions. Yeah.
So enjoy your summer of sports as well. Enjoy Sports Day, but enjoy all the sports come this summer.
Yeah.
Next week, as always is tradition this time of year, it's bibliotherapy time with exams, etc. So for those of you who've not done it before, that means bringing in a book that's bibliotherapy, i.e. a book to help your mood, relieve your stress.
Yes, relieve your stress. Yeah, absolutely.
A comfort book to turn to. Okay.
Might be fiction, might be non-fiction, it might be poetry, could be anything.
Absolutely.
Anyway.
So please do bring along.
Yeah.
And we'll see you next week.
Next
then.
week. Okay.
Bye.
Thanks everybody. Good to see you. Bye.